At least 90% of Fortune 500 companies are using artificial intelligence in their applicant tracking system and their early hiring process. But I know that for a fact because I'm also on the technology side. So what that means is your resume that worked back in 2018, 2019, 2020, it's not going to get through a lot of these applicant tracking systems. The other irony in all this, Lucy, is we've always talked about the value of networking and so on. With AI in the picture, it's making networking more of a premium than it ever was. With AI in the picture, we're seeing more of a need to do this networking and this outreach and making these personal contacts that we're having now.
Hello and welcome. It is my pleasure to introduce to you today Kyle Smith. Are you struggling to hire the right people to keep your best employees or make sense of an HR system that feels outdated or complicated? Or maybe you're a job seeker sending out resumes and hearing nothing back, unsure how to stand out or tell your story in a way that actually lands interviews. If either one of these are you, you're not alone. That's exactly why Kyle founded HR Kyle Services to help individuals and organizations simplify, modernize, and accelerate the approach to HR, leadership, and career success. Kyle Patrick Smith is a seasoned corporate HR executive, keynote speaker, author, and career strategist. More than 25 years in the trenches of real HR work, leading hiring teams, coaching executives, navigating complex employee issues, and building culture. He saw how many consultants and coaches are giving advice without real-world HR experience, and that's what makes his work different. Kyle is the author of 2 books, Get the Job You Love and Recruiting is Easy. He's the co-host of HR Kyle podcast, and his background includes an MBA in HR, a bachelor's in psychology, and additional education in counseling, performance psychology, and organizational dynamics. He's a husband, proud dad, a sports memorabilia collector, a history nerd, and a small town Ohio guy who still believes in relationships, hard work, and doing the right thing. And I am Lucy Gable, integrative leadership coach and trainer, author, speaker, and your host of Leadership, Life, Health, and Happiness. I think you're going to enjoy this conversation today. We're talking about a lot of relevant, cutting-edge issues. Kyle, thank you so much for being on the show today. I'm excited to have our conversation. I think that a lot of people are going to be interested in what you have to say.
That sounds like really good copy. I don't know who
It's
wrote
good
that.
copy.
Jeez.
I
Wow.
like it.
Yeah, me too. That's impressive. Thank you very much, Lucy. Great to be here. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Me too. So career guidance for individuals and for companies, talent management and talent acquisition.
Correct.
Those are your specialties. I know HR in general does a whole lot of things, right?
We do. We certainly do.
Yeah. I want to say I remember when I got out into my own business from being in a variety of companies and also even running a couple, and then realizing that I had to be all the departments, and then realizing that HR is not just hiring people. HR is a lot of stuff, a lot of rules and regulations and forms. And I mean, there's so many things to figure out if you're
Absolutely.
a sole proprietor or if you have your own business. I'm sure that's why they need you. So how
Absolutely.
do you help in different ways? How would you work with a company?
Great question. One thing you hit on here that I think was critical is HR really plays a pivotal role in business growth as much as anything. So as you mentioned, I think it's a great way to put it. I've been in the trenches, so I know what it means to lead an HR function. I know what it means to sit across from hiring managers, employees, and candidates, and so on. But what I also know, Lucy, is every situation, every organization is a little bit different. And for us to be effective in our role as partners to our clients, we have to understand those nuances. Every organization has a personality. So a big part of our effort when we're working with our businesses is understanding who they are and what's important to them. On the candidate side, we're coaching our candidates to understand that business, understand how things get done. How do they make money? To do that, that gives you such an edge over your quote unquote competition.
It's individuals and companies. So companies will come to you for help, but also
Yeah.
individuals come to you for help in
Right.
finding a job, right? Or
Yeah.
maybe getting a promotion, things like that.
All of those things.
So I want to jump big picture right now. I know you're keeping up with what's going on in the country specifically. A lot of reorganizations going on.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
is there something specific that's standing out to you right now that you feel you can talk to?
I think I would come at this a little bit different. One thing that my experience has taught me, and this is especially working with people at the highest levels of organization, one of the biggest challenges that we face is the challenges that we create for ourselves. And there's a lot of evidence on this in psychology as well, that we so often feed ourselves information that it makes a situation more challenging. It makes it more, uh, negative. It conjures up these feelings. We're very driven by emotions, yet we're wired to be able to control them. So one thing that I notice is, and I've noticed this throughout my career, the people that weather these situations like we're talking about now, they don't assume anything. They take the situation at face value and they trust their instincts, they trust their judgment, they trust their experience and the history that they have, rather than running through these scenarios in their minds of the worst case scenario, or this thing could happen or that case could happen. It really comes down to, don't let your imagination get carried away. Take the situation for what it is. Trust your instincts, trust your experience that you've gained over a number of years working, and just take the situation as it comes.
Oh, that's a great gem. Really good for people to take with. And can you give us a little more detail on that? Okay, so we see, you know, what do you mean by running with assumptions or, thinking too much about it?
Yeah, great example. So I'll give you an example that hits really close to home, quite literally. So many of your listeners know about the store Joann Fabrics, Joann Crafts. They were headquartered just quite literally about 15 minutes from our office here. So needless to say, we know a lot of former employees at all levels of the organization. And many of them have become clients of ours as they navigate their career journey. And one of the things that we coach them on is cut out the outside noise, how bad the economy is, how many challenges are, how many people that are looking for jobs. And it's quite literally not a coincidence that our clients that get jobs sooner are the ones that are much more adept at cutting out that outside noise.
Hmm.
The ones who are now several months in and still haven't found anything, they're most often prone to that noise of, oh, the job market's tough right now. A lot of people are losing their jobs. Prices are way up. Those are the ones that are challenged in their job search.
It's the conversations they're having in their head
Yeah.
and what I guess they're allowing themselves to focus on.
Yep.
That's
And allowing themselves to absorb. It's just like anything else in this world, any part of nature. Are we absorbing it or are we repelling it? If we're absorbing it, we're carrying it. If we're repelling it, we're isolating ourselves from that. We're protecting ourselves from whatever that is.
And you have this real world research that says people who don't focus on the negatives, basically, are the ones who are getting the jobs faster.
Most definitely. We live it every day. And part of it, if you stop and think about it at face value, it makes a lot of sense because, and it's something that a statement I've said for years. We bring ourselves to situations and you think, well, of course we do. But what I mean by that is we bring our whole selves to that. So if we already have a negative outlook, if we already have more of a down perspective on the world and everything, guess who's showing up in that interview? That same person. One thing that we know about communication is the vast majority of communication is nonverbal.
Hmm.
Individuals pick up on that. Hiring managers, the HR, they're picking up on the fact that you're not feeling good. You're not feeling good about yourself. You're not feeling good about your situation. Maybe your handshake isn't as firm. Maybe the eye contact's not quite as there. The language that you choose to use, the tone of voice that you use, all of those things come out in those interview situations. It's all fueled by what you're allowing to come into your body based upon the situation.
I love this.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I have two questions that stem from that. What would you tell someone to think about, or how do we get to start feeling that
Yeah.
confident about
Mhm.
ourselves when we go into that interview or that important meeting?
Well, it's the same type of advice that I give when we're coaching how to answer questions. And that is, let's refer back to your history. Let's talk about past experiences that you've had. And what we find out is all of us have challenges in our lives. One of my first questions whenever I interview a candidate for a position is I always say, Lucy, I've got your resume here in front of me so I can see the dates and the company names and everything. But you know what I'd really like to know, Lucy? I'd really like to know the story behind the resume. And it's that same kind of conversation with the individual that's feeling the weight of the world through this job search. We talk about their story as well. And what you come to find out is they've had many challenges in their lives. They've had many ups and downs. And you know what? They're still here, they're still contributing, and they're still doing it. And what we know is, I mean, the simplest example of all, the best predictor of future performance is past performance in the same or a similar situation. So we base everything we do on that. And we start at that point to get the spirits up. And we do that same thing when we talk about interview prep, because then we say, Lucy, you're going to get some questions and you're going to get questions about challenges you faced and all these things. Well, this is where your stories come in, Lucy. Tell your story about how you overcame working with a difficult coworker or how you overcame learning a new task and all of these things. Because the other thing that's beautiful about stories is humans love stories. We're drawn to that. That's why we watch television. It's not a coincidence those programs follow the pattern that they do because they tell a nice, neat story and it's nice and neat and tidy and they wrap it up in a nice, neat bow at the end of 30 minutes,
Yeah. Do you
right?
coach people on that storytelling?
100%. Yeah, the method that we talk about is what's called STAR. So you form your story by using the STAR acronym. You talk about the situation, the task that was needed, the action that you took, and the results that happened. And you form your story in that pattern. Because again, as the interviewer, it's very easy to follow that because again, we're trained as humans to follow a story.
Mm-hmm. So stories are important when you're talking about yourself.
Yep.
A lot of people find it difficult, though, to talk about themselves and their
Yep.
successes.
Mhm.
How,
I
go
Oh
ahead.
my gosh, you could tell I already was expecting that because we have clients like that. I'm going to say this too because I think it's important for your audience to hear this. The group that I find most challenged with telling their stories and quote unquote bragging about themselves is most often women.
Oh,
And I want to make that clear. And I'm going to go off on a tangent just for a moment on that as well. What I also find is women are most likely to sell themselves short on a position. So they will see a job posting, it will catch their attention, they'll go through the description, and if they don't match every one of those requirements or what it's looking for, a woman is much more likely to pass over that job than a man would.
yeah.
And to me, the two are very interrelated. So I have a client right now who's a woman, and one of our biggest coaching topics was look at all the wonderful things you've done. She's mid 50s. She's been married and divorced. She's raised a daughter who's now an RN. She started working 8 years ago. She's had all of these different jobs in all these different places. She had to learn new systems and she changed jobs a couple of times. All the while, she's going through a divorce and striking out on her own. And I'm hearing this story and thinking, wow, I'm getting goosebumps. She's incredible. But it took a lot of coaching to talk with her to say, you are really incredible. If I were to, stacking up against other candidates, you stand out for all of these reasons. Lucy, has it taken a lot of time? Do I still to this morning deal with some of that pushback because we had our coaching call this morning? She has an interview tomorrow. And it was still a matter of coaching her through to say, you can do this job. We talked about the key criteria in the job, and I said, well, you've done that before. You've done this, and pretty soon she's telling those stories again. Oh yeah, I guess you're right. And then we transition to the part. Okay, now that I've convinced you of what I already know, now I want you to take these same stories and take them to the interview so the interviewer knows as well. And the key thing here is, and we can all relate to this, some percentage of our clients are clients that have lost a job.
Hmm.
In their mind, they take that to mean I'm just not good enough. In my mind, What that really means is you just weren't right for that situation. You're plenty good enough. Just at this point in time in that situation, you weren't the right person. So again, it's reframing that thought process. Don't see it as I'm not good. See it as I'm just not right for that situation at that point in time.
I'm right there with you in terms of reframing thought processes. And it can be hard. You can say this and people will be listening. It can be hard to do it yourself and for yourself. It's so much better when you have someone else helping you with the
Yeah.
reframe. That people can who can see, how does this look
Yep.
from the outside? What are we seeing from here? And then you've got to convince or help them to see it in themselves, right?
Yep. And Lucy, I'm so glad you bring that up because as part of our services for job candidates, we offer, resume update, LinkedIn update, all of those things that you really need for your job search. But the other part of that is a weekly touch base call. And the feedback I consistently get from our candidates is that's the most valuable thing we offer. And it's exactly what you're talking about. It's having an opportunity to talk about the challenges, talk about what they're thinking, what they're feeling, the interview that they've got coming up, all of these things. And it's my role to be a very good listener, to take it all in and make sure that they're viewing themselves as I believe that they should. And they see that value.
So, unfortunately, HR Kyle can't take the whole world on. Everyone can't be your client.
I'd love to, but
All
okay.
right.
Yeah.
So, what would you say to people who may not be ready to reach out to you for help or might feel like they just could use a little bit of something to help them to start to think differently? What
Yeah.
would you give them?
Well, if they're in a job search, and this will serve them in a lot of different ways, sit down and make a list of all the things that you've done in your career, big, small, and otherwise, and make that list because it does two things. One, it hits on the point that we're talking about, reinforcing, hey, you really have done a lot of things. You've learned a lot. You've accomplished a lot. The other thing that inevitably does is it prepares you really well for the interview
Right.
because we're going to ask you, what are the things that you're proud of? What are the accomplishments that you, and guess what? I did this list. It made me feel a whole heck of a lot better about myself because yes, I've done a lot. And guess what? Now I can share these things with that interviewer who wants to know, hey, why should I hire you?
Yeah. And don't be afraid to tell stories, right?
Tell your stories. Yep.
And yet, don't be too long-winded. That's
Yes, we
another- tell
we coach on that as well, Lucy. Yeah. And unfortunately I'm guilty of that. So I'm very conscious of saying, okay, we need to keep stories to a certain limit.
Right. Stay
Yeah.
with your point. Don't go off on tangents, right? Because that's
Oops.
also not appreciated.
But I need to set a better example of that here than Lucy.
You're doing great. You're
Yeah,
doing
thank
great,
you.
Kyle.
Yeah.
I often coach people in that section, just be more clear and concise and directive with your point. So let's just take it back another step, though, Kyle. What would you say to someone? Okay, they did their resume, they know what they've done internally, and yet they have been rejected so many times and they're just beaten down. Is
Well, I saw something today, and I think this is a good reminder. And one of the things that I focus on in my personal life is feeding myself information that's positive and valuable to me as I look to continue to grow. And one of the ways that I do that is I listen to and watch a lot of biographies on famous people, specifically who have built something or started something. The CEO of Starbucks, for example, he was rejected, over 250 times from lenders to get Starbucks started. There's the story of Colonel Sanders. He didn't start KFC or Kentucky Fried Chicken till he was 65, and then he was rejected by all of these different places. So we have to be careful in attaching our impression of our value to what certain other people think,
mm,
because all it takes is one person, and I don't know when it's going to happen. Might be the third person, might be the 333rd person that you meet, that they see your value, and that's all it took. And look at what can happen from there.
that is incredibly valuable for people to hear, not to attach your own value onto what other people need. It's not even thinking. It's like
Exactly.
you may not be the right fit for so many other reasons. It has nothing to do with you or your or your history or your intelligence or your personality. It's
Well,
completely something else you can't even guess.
I love to make parallels with nature, and we see that in nature all the time. Think about this beautiful rose. And nobody, I don't think there's anybody listening here that would say, oh my gosh, I just don't care for roses. Everybody looks at a rose, they think it's beautiful. But we all know they're not the easiest plant to grow.
That's
You've
right.
got to take care of the soil and you've got to water it just right and make sure that it has just the much light amount of lighting. It's a beautiful flower, but if it doesn't have the right conditions, it's not going to be beautiful. Nature and human life very very similar.
Mm. Tell me just a little more about that rose link. Roses are not the easiest plant to have, to grow, to make flourish. So how does that relate to this human being side?
Look at this beautiful rose that's so valuable as far as, you buy a dozen roses and how much they cost, and people love to get those as a gift. But yeah, it is a little bit more difficult to nourish that rose. But what we find is that difficulty is rewarded by this beautiful flower. So
Mm.
sometimes the most difficult challenges are rewarded by this wonderful outcome. And, it really does point to the fact that going through difficult challenges, they really are worth it because there's something on that other side. You and I we could pick a location here in my area. It's pretty flat. Probably the highest you're going to climb is about 400 or 500 feet, right? Nobody's going to look at that and say that's a wonderful accomplishment. Oh my gosh, let's celebrate that. But if we decided we were going to climb Mount Everest and we did it, that would be considered a fantastic accomplishment. It'd probably be published in the news and we could write a book about it and all these things. Again, life situations are very similar to that.
Love it. Such great perspective, Kyle. So now I just want to circle back around to the other side of the coin. Let's talk a little bit about organizations, Kyle, and
Mhm.
what are you seeing organizations are going through right now? Because I feel that we're not really talking about that much these days.
No, we're not. And it's unfortunate because organizations really, from what I can see, are going through a little bit of an identity crisis.
Mm.
And part of that is, self-inflicted, and part of that's the nature of the environment we're in. And I hate to bring this up because I'd like to think it's a distant topic, but it's not yet. We're still feeling the fallout. And that's what COVID did to us. March of 2020 really caused this radical change and uprooting of all the things that we knew and we thought we knew about the world of work and running a business and employees, employee relations, and all that. It really got turned upside down. We were immediately forced to make some decisions that we weren't necessarily ready to make yet, but we felt that we had to. And the biggest one there is making employees work remotely and building all these schedules. So we went ahead and did that, and we made some other changes as well. And now, here we are. We're 5 years. Hard to believe it's 5 years removed from that. And we're still dealing with that because now organizations, even big ones, Sherwin-Williams, which is local here to my area, it's in Cleveland, Ohio. They've just announced that by 2026, they want all of their employees back in the office, no more remote situations and so on. So, these are big companies, but we're seeing it with small companies as well, making these changes kind of back to, and I hate to use the term normal or whatever we want to call that. So I think what we're dealing with in organizations right now is this true identity crisis, because the other place that we're seeing it is we staffed up, during COVID and after there was a flush of money into the economy and so on. So we staffed up as organizations. And now here again, we've seen the fallout of that and the layoffs and the downsizing and so on that we're seeing now is absolutely a fallout of COVID yet again, because, we're dealing with what I would consider a more real economy. You don't have the government interjecting as much money into our currency and in the economy in general. So we're dealing with a more real economy at this point. And as a result, we're coming down from this COVID high. So
Mm.
again, a lot of confusion. We can't be remote anymore. These perks that you had in the office before, they don't exist now either. We're taking those away. And, maybe we're going to reinstate your 401k match that we took away. And organizations as a whole and companies are struggling to figure out what their identity is.
So we're having an identity crisis with organizations, and it's
Mhm.
almost like there's um, a recovery swing from
Yeah.
the pandemic that maybe swung too far in one direction. Now it's recovering itself too far back in the other. Would
Yeah.
you say that maybe we're not even finished swinging yet.
I don't think we are. I think your point's well taken. I think we're probably at the apex of the swing back. So if you can imagine this being, if you can see it on the screen, this is March, April of 2020, and here we are July, August, June, July, August of 2025. So I think we're going to begin to see the pendulum swing a little bit more back this way. But I think it's going to be a slow swing
Hmm.
because that swing in March, February and March of 2020 was drastic and it happened literally overnight. I mean, all of us can remember the weekend before COVID hit.
That's right.
And when we walked in that next week, it was drastically different. It was a quick change like that. But I don't think we're going to see that swinging back. I think we're still going to be at this more extreme end, waiting for that swing to come back.
So, what is the extreme end? Where are we? Can you
Well,
identify a little bit of that?
part of it is I think we're seeing organizations probably lay off more employees than they needed to be. I think we're seeing a right sizing of organizations that have closed for one reason or another. They didn't manage COVID or the post-COVID situation well, so they've closed up now. So I still think we're at this extreme and at this point in time, but I think we're at the high end of it to where we're seeing lessening of layoffs. So we're starting to see some job growth. We saw that in June. We saw, better than predicted job growth in June. I think we're going to see it again in July. I think we've seen a decrease in inflation. So that's starting to get back to normal again. So in my mind, Lucy, I think the worst is behind us. You've got a few organizations that are still catching up, but I think the worst is, in my mind, I think it's behind us.
Mm, okay. So, we're still going along though with less money being spent. And I think people still need to be resilient with that and be expecting that, right? Just there's a tightening of the
Exactly.
belts, tightening of the wallets.
Well, and I think economies and a lot of things. Again, talk about nature a lot. When things are left untouched, nature and everything else in our lives has a natural way of going back to the middle, back to the equilibrium, right? And that's what we're needing to see here because I think some things happened during COVID and after that were pretty extreme. I'll give you some quick examples that'll make my point. So heading into that summer, I had a few employees at the employer that I was head of HR for. They quite literally said, "You know what? I'm just going to take the summer off. I've gotten this COVID money. Jobs are easy to find right now, and maybe it's June. Maybe I'll reach back out to you in September or October." That's an extreme reaction. That's not a normal economic or workplace situation. But we were seeing those type of situations in COVID. And we were seeing a lot of people, and I remember talking about this, that it was quite literally more profitable for them not to work or not to open their doors back up rather than open their business back up or go back to work. And again,
Mm,
abnormal situation. So we were at a really big extreme there. So we're still recovering from a lot of that mindset of just thinking, well, of course it's going to work out. I don't really need to do anything. It's going to work out.
hmm.
So we're now a lot of people are realizing, you know what? I can't conduct myself the way that I do before. That's one of the things that we sell here. If you're job searching like you were in 2019 and 2018 and all those times, that's not working in 2025. What we talk to our candidates about now is about job searching in 2025 and what that looks like, and not the least of which artificial intelligence. But we also talk about our companies in the same manner when we talk about talent management, talent acquisition. Finding candidates looks very different than it did, COVID, post-COVID, and pre-COVID. It looks very different now. So our approaches there need to be different.
That is extremely interesting, and I'd just like to dive into those a little bit more with you.
Yep.
Uh, can you share some of the differences that you're talking about? What are we looking at now with finding candidates and also searching for jobs?
Yeah, great question. So one thing we know is at least 90% of Fortune 500 companies are using artificial intelligence in their applicant tracking system and their early hiring process. So 90%. That number could well be closer to 100 by now because that's data from just a few months ago. But I know that for a fact because I'm also on the technology side. So I have partners on the technology side that tell me, yes, we're not only building AI into applicant tracking systems, but AI is helping us build applicant tracking systems. So what that means is your resume that worked back in 2018, 2019, 2020, it's not going to get through a lot of these applicant tracking systems because those systems are looking for clean, easy to follow documents. They don't want a lot of graphics. They want to see terminology. They're looking for keywords. They're looking for how many times a keyword comes up. They may not be very responsive to paper that's a different color or particular fonts that are a different color or a different size or that are difficult to read. Or maybe you included your picture on your resume all these years and you really don't want to do that now because, again, these systems don't read that well. Or you've always used PDF as far as documents that you submit. Well, those systems don't read PDF really well. They work much better with Word documents. So we know to submit our documents in Word. So just on the job search side alone, Lucy, that's the impact to just resumes. Now think about your first one or two interviews being conducted by an AI bot. We have candidates that are doing that.
Mm.
And we've had candidates to where that particular situation derails. They're in the middle of an interview, and for whatever reason, that AI bot all of a sudden starts to malfunction. What do they do at that point? So it's all these things that quite literally just even a year or two ago, we weren't even talking about, we weren't even thinking about. But it's quite literally changed the way that you look for jobs. The other irony in all this, Lucy, is we've always talked about the value of networking and so on. With AI in the picture, it's making networking more of a premium than it ever was. And I'll give you a quick story there. We had a candidate and we've been coaching her for a while to think out of the box. Don't just see job, apply and wait for it to happen. Go out and visit employers that you might want to work for if they're a small employer. See if you can get a contact name. So she goes to a particular employer that she was interested in. She got the name of the person she needed to talk to. She went out to the parking lot, picked up the phone, called the person. What do you know? The person answered. She had an interview the next day scheduled. The person admired the fact that she took the initiative to call and express her interest. So you talk about a pendulum swinging. With AI in the picture, we're seeing more of a need to do this networking and this outreach and making these personal contacts that we're having now. Because what AI is replacing is the repetitive things. What it's not replacing is this interaction, this dialogue that we're having. So again, that's the candidate side. But think about how that's also affecting your company side. You're now wanting to network more. You're wanting to get to know your candidates more because what AI is also doing is it's making resumes look a little bit more generic. Everybody uses AI to build their resume and their cover letter. Well, that's not really the real person. If I really want to know Lucy and who she's going to be as an employee or possibly who she's going to be as a candidate, I better just talk with her. So as organizations, we're starting to say, hey, you really need to network more. Build these pipelines so you get to know these candidates and who they really are. Don't fall into the AI trap to where the person literally has AI up on this left-hand part of the screen. And when you're asking a question, AI spitting the answer that they're then reading in the interview. And that is reality. That's quite literally happening at this point. AI is building people's resumes, it's building LinkedIn profiles, it's building cover letters, it's answering questions during interviews that the candidate is then reading to the organization. Again, these are all the things that we know are happening. But think about how that's impacting the world of work and all the things that we do.
Oh gosh, that was gold. Again, thank you for all these drops of gold, Kyle. I think this is a lot for people to think about. In closing, this is a great place for us to end and maybe have another conversation in future about, because I know all of this is consistently changing and growing. Yeah. What would you say to people about the fact that so many things have changed and are changing?
Get back to the basics. Focus on the basics. What I mean by that is relationships, getting to know people, getting to know them for who they really are. HR, there's a reason why it's H&R. It's human. Get back to the human side. Rely on the tools to make your job easier. And that's the beauty. If you use these tools right, and believe me, I use AI in this business a ton, but I use it on things that can't replace this. And what it does is it frees me up to spend more time doing this. So what I would tell companies is use AI as a tool to do those repetitive things that you don't want to waste time on or you're just not very good at, and spend more time doing this. getting out of your office and talking to your employees, find out what they need, getting to know them. What are their challenges? If you're an HR person, get out into the community, find out what goes on in this community. Where do people want to work? What do they want to do? How can we help them? How can we present our employer as a better employer to work for? Focus on those people things that an AI bot can never replace.
Mhm.
That's my biggest advice. And the same holds true for the candidate. Get out there and meet people. Go to these events. Nobody's more of an introvert, Lucy, than me. But you know what? I go to events because there's a purpose. There's a purpose for me to be there, to meet people, to see if I can help people. Approach your job search, approach your work life in the same manner. What can I do for that other person? It makes it a lot easier to go into those situations. But that's where I would say focus. Focus on these kind of things. Because I don't know about you, I love this. I love this. I could do this all
Yeah.
day.
Same. I know. And I can let my podcast interviews go forever. So I think we'll call it time for now. And I just want to say thank you so much for sharing this great stuff with the audience. And of course, I will put in the description links to how to get in touch with you. Would you like to plug anything quickly before we're done?
Other than our business, we're here to help. We're here to help whether you're an organization or a person that's maybe struggling in your job search. We have a lot of resources and obviously we think we're pretty good at what we do and we like to help people. So that would be my biggest plug. Check out our website. It's hrkyle.com. Look for us online. If you do a search of HR Kyle, you're going to find a whole bunch of things out there. And again, we're looking to see where we can add value.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you, Lucy.
And to you as a listener, I wanted to say thanks for listening in on our conversation. And if you liked this episode, give it a like or 5 stars and let me know in the comments if it made you think any differently or do anything differently. I'm interested. By the way, I'm still eating my coffee. And if you'd like to get 20% off your first order of dry brew coffee chews, which are like toffee, delicious, and also not messy, very portable, go on over to drybrew.com/Lucy with an I 20 and get 20% off your first order of dry brew coffee chews. This is Lucy Gable, and
Bye-bye.
we'll talk to you next time.